When Milwaukee police entered Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment in 1991, they expected to find evidence of violence, but what they uncovered was far darker than anyone imagined. Skulls were arranged in a closet as if they were part of a private display. Photographs showed victims in various stages of dismemberment, and human remains were preserved inside the home as though they were ordinary belongings. These were not random objects left behind. They were trophies, carefully chosen reminders of the lives Dahmer had stolen. Throughout history, many killers have done the same, though their collections have taken different forms. Some hid wallets, others collected jewelry, and a few went as far as preserving body parts. To them, these trophies were not simple possessions. They were anchors of power, a way to relive the crime in silence, and proof that they still controlled the memory of their victims long after the act was over. The question is not only what they kept, but why they could never let go. In criminology, the word trophy has a very specific meaning. It is not just any item stolen from a victim, but something the killer keeps to preserve the memory of what they have done. To investigators, these items become powerful clues because they show not only that a crime took place, but also reveal how the offender thinks. Trophies are often confused with souvenirs, and while the two overlap, there is a subtle difference. Souvenirs may serve to fuel a fantasy or provide comfort when the killer recalls the act, while trophies usually represent proof of dominance or achievement. Whether it is a trinket, a piece of clothing, or even a body part, what matters most is the meaning the killer attaches to it. From the outside, these objects look ordinary, yet once you know the story behind them, they transform into chilling symbols of power, obsession, and control. The idea of killers keeping trophies is not new. As far back as the early 20th century, detectives began noticing that certain offenders would hold on to items connected to their crimes. In some cases, this practice even appeared in earlier folklore, with criminals rumored to keep locks of hair or clothing from their victims. But it was only when modern criminology and profiling developed that the behavior was studied in depth. By the 1970s, with the rise of serial killers in the United States, investigators and the FBI's behavioral science unit started to see a clear pattern. Many of the most notorious offenders were not content to simply commit the crime and leave the scene behind. Instead, they needed something they could return to, a way to keep the memory alive. These trophies became part of their private world, hidden away in closets, drawers, or secret rooms, only to be discovered when police finally closed in. This pattern helped investigators connect missing persons cases to suspects, because even when there was little physical evidence at the crime scene, the hidden collections often told the full story. The least shocking trophies often appear the most ordinary. A wallet, a set of keys, an ID card, or a handbag may not seem unusual on their own, but in the hands of a serial killer, they carry a far darker meaning. These items are pieces of a person's identity, small fragments of a life taken too soon, and by keeping them, the killer holds on to a symbol of control. Cornelius Berger, operating in South Africa in the 1930s, murdered 5 women and quietly kept their handbags as mementos. Decades later, American killer Joel Rifkin confessed to 17 murders, and inside his home, police discovered a disturbing collection of victims' belongings. They found driver's licenses, credit cards, jewelry, and clothing, each item tied to a woman who had vanished. To Rifkin, these objects were not meaningless clutter. They were evidence of power, tokens that allowed him to relive what he had done in the privacy of his home. In Manchester, England, Trevor Hardy murdered young women during the mid-1970s and kept their handbags, jewelry, and even blood-stained clothing. These ordinary possessions hidden in his room were later uncovered by investigators and became part of the case that proved his guilt. To the killer, these items may have seemed like trophies. To detectives, they were the voices of victims speaking from beyond the grave, pointing directly to the person who had silenced them. When killers move beyond simple trinkets and begin collecting clothing or jewelry, the trophies take on a deeper layer of intimacy. Unlike wallets or ID cards, these items are worn on the body, close to the skin, infused with personal meaning. For the victim, they may have represented style, identity, or even sentiment. For the killer, they became a way to keep that presence alive. Ivan Milah, known as the backpacker killer in Australia, targeted young travelers in the early 1990s. When police searched his property, they found sleeping bags and clothing that belonged to his victims. These items were ordinary camping gear to most, but in Milat's hidden world, they were reminders of the control he had exerted over strangers who trusted the open road. In another case, James Lloyd, a serial rapist in England, kept a collection of women's high heels. Each pair was stolen from victims during assaults and stored away in his home. To investigators, the shoes revealed more than a fetish. They showed a need to claim something directly tied to the victim's identity, something intimate that marked the boundary between fantasy and reality. Joel Rifkin, who had already filled his home with victims' belongings, also took jewelry and clothing. These items added to the growing archive of trophies he maintained, each one serving as a physical connection to a crime he was unwilling to let go of. For detectives, the discovery of such objects is powerful. Jewelry can be traced back to a family photograph. Clothing can be identified by a loved one, and these intimate items often provide the missing link that ties a killer to a victim. For the offender, they are treasures hidden away. For everyone else, they are proof that an ordinary item can hold the weight of unimaginable violence. While personal belongings and clothing tie the killer to the victim in a physical sense, photographs and recordings capture something even more disturbing. They freeze a moment in time, allowing the offender to revisit not just the memory of the crime, but the exact image of it. These trophies transform the victim into an object that can be viewed again and again, long after the crime itself has ended. Jeffrey Dahmer is perhaps the most infamous example. When police entered his apartment in 1991, they not only found human remains, but also dozens of photographs. Each image documented stages of his crimes, from his victims alive and unaware to the aftermath of their deaths. These photographs allowed Dahmer to relive his acts whenever he wished, turning his private collection into a window of horror that investigators later used to piece together the truth. In Germany, Manfred Seal lived a double life. Outwardly, he was an ordinary man, but hidden inside his home were hard drives filled with violent images, including photographs and videos tied to his crimes. Investigators described his digital collection as a form of trophy, one that preserved his fantasies and his acts in a format that could never fade with time. Even killers who did not keep physical items sometimes turned to photography or recording as their chosen method of preservation. The camera became their storage, a way to possess not just an object, but the victim's very image. These collections revealed more than cruelty. They revealed an obsession with memory, a refusal to let the crime belong to the past. For investigators, finding these images was both vital and devastating. Each photograph confirmed the truth, offering evidence that could not be denied, while also confronting detectives with the reality of how much pleasure the killer had taken in documenting the suffering. The most disturbing trophies are those taken directly from the human body. Unlike belongings, clothing, or photographs, body parts transform the victim into an object in the most literal way. For these killers, possession of flesh, bone, or organs is not only a way to relive the crime, but also a way to feel the ultimate control over life and death. Jeffrey Dahmer's apartment revealed not only photographs, but also skulls, bones, and preserved remains stored inside his refrigerator and freezer. For him, these were not simply reminders. They were a way to keep his victims with him, to erase the line between company and possession. Ted Bundy also crossed into this territory. Known for his charm and his manipulation, Bundy murdered dozens of women across the United States in the 1970s. In some cases, he decapitated his victims and admitted later that he kept their severed heads for a time. Witnesses reported that he washed their hair and treated them as though he could recreate their presence. Ed Gein, whose crimes in Wisconsin inspired countless horror films, filled his home with grotesque creations made from human skin and bones. Investigators discovered chairs, lampshades, and clothing stitched together from remains. For Gein, body parts were not only trophies but raw material, proof of his complete domination over the human form. In Germany, Manfred Seal's hidden life was revealed through evidence that he had collected body parts as well, storing them in secret. His trophies were not displayed, but concealed, a private reminder of his violence. For police, the discovery of body parts is often the final confirmation of horror. Unlike a piece of jewelry or a photograph, there is no distance, no disguise. What they uncover is the victim themselves, transformed into an object, preserved not out of respect, but out of obsession. For criminologists, the act of keeping trophies is one of the most revealing windows into the mind of a serial killer. These objects, whether small souvenirs or shocking remains, are never chosen at random. Each one reflects a need, a desire, or a hunger that goes beyond the act of murder itself. Some killers take trophies to relive the crime. A wallet or a ring becomes a trigger for memory, a way to replay the scene in their imagination. Others keep items to preserve control, proving to themselves that the victim has not truly escaped. Even in death, the killer maintains possession through an object that holds part of their identity. For some, trophies serve as anchors of fantasy. They can fuel private rituals, where the killer revisits the feeling of dominance and power. Photographs and recordings make this process even more vivid, allowing them to see the victim again and again. Trapped in a moment the killer chose to freeze. And in the darkest cases, when body parts are kept, the meaning shifts to something even more unsettling. The killer is not only preserving memory, but also attempting to merge with the victim, to make them part of their own world, sometimes in ways that blur the line between human presence and object possession. Investigators often say that these trophies are more than evidence. They are the killer's diary, a personal record written not in words but in objects, each one chosen for what it represents in the mind of the offender. For detectives, trophies are more than disturbing collections. They are keys that unlock cases. A single ring found in a drawer can connect a suspect to a missing woman. A driver's license discovered in a shoebox can tie a man to a body buried miles away. What killers see as personal treasures often become the evidence that exposes them. When police raided Joel Rifkin's home in New York, they uncovered wallets, IDs, and jewelry belonging to his victims. These items became central in linking him to multiple disappearances and murders, giving investigators the proof they needed to build their case. In England, the shoes collected by James Lloyd were critical. Survivors of his attacks described the footwear he had stolen, and when detectives found them hidden in his house, each pair confirmed the accounts. What he had kept as fetish objects became undeniable evidence in court. Even in cases where physical bodies could not be identified, trophies sometimes provided the missing link. Jewelry recognized by grieving families, photographs recovered from a killer's hiding place, or bones uncovered in secret storage often gave names to the lost and faces to the unknown. For law enforcement, these discoveries are bittersweet. They bring closure to families who feared they might never know the truth, but they also reveal the depths of obsession that drove the crimes. Every trophy found in an attic, a basement, or a hidden box is a silent witness, pointing back to the moment of violence and the person responsible. The trophies of serial killers tell us as much about their minds as the crimes themselves. Each item, whether a handbag, a piece of jewelry, a photograph, or even a human skull, carries a meaning that goes far beyond its surface. To the killer, it is a way to keep power alive, to hold on to a life that ended in violence. To investigators, it is evidence that speaks when victims cannot. Looking at these collections is unsettling because the objects are so ordinary. A driver's license, a ring, a pair of shoes, or a photograph might seem harmless on its own. But in the context of these crimes, they become symbols of obsession, frozen moments of control that the killer could not let go. What makes them most haunting is the intimacy they represent. These trophies were once part of real lives, tied to real people with families, friends, and futures. The killer's decision to preserve them strips away that humanity, reducing memory to possession. And yet, paradoxically, those same objects often bring justice by linking the killer to the very people they tried to erase. In the end, trophies are not just remnants of crime. They are reminders of how far human obsession can reach, how memory can be twisted into control, and how the smallest object can hold the weight of unspeakable violence. When police uncover a killer's trophies, they find more than evidence. They step into a private world built on memory, fantasy, and control, a world where ordinary objects become symbols of extraordinary violence. These trophies expose the truth about the killer, yet they also raise a question that may never be fully answered. Are these collections simply a way to relive the crime, or do they reveal something even darker? A desire to keep the victim alive in the killer's mind forever?